Hi, I want to do a full breakdown of every class, all of their skills, and their meta build. So let me just get you the meta build as quickly as possible. It's going to be this. Some people are going to raise an eyebrow and disagree and say this is better. I will go into more detail. Just know this skill's really good, but it's also a crutch that becomes completely useless after you've bought your weapon. You will always be able to get your best final weapon by around wave 3 in multiplayer especially, which means once you've got that weapon online, this does nothing for the entire rest of the game, aka waves 3, 4, 5, and the boss, the places where you're most likely to die. Whereas this will actually do something. Okay, so I'll go more in depth on this, but if you just want to copy best build, here you go, here it is. And if you just want to know what you should do, start with the Wraith and use overpressure rounds with Stumble, Suppressor with Stumble, Foregrip with damage under a quarter mag, Panic on a reflex sight, this is for operational budget reasons, damage on mag, and Stumble power on the higher damage, slower fire rate receiver with Stumble. Then, by about wave 2 or 3, you want to go into a Scar. And from there, you want to go into the standard Vulcan or Enfeeble Grenade Launcher. Okay, now that's just your generic meta setup. You just copy the skill tree, and then on each of those waves, grab each of those weapons. Okay, now let's do a much more in-depth class breakdown. So these two are honestly kind of equal, though I will say you do need Fire Sale if you want to stick with the commando theme and you want to stick with like Scar, Knight's Bane, etc. You will just run out of ammo on multiplayer Hell on Earth if you don't do this. But insider trading is just better. Armor is much more valuable than ammo because meta weapons don't have a problem with ammo. And commando is one of the least survivable classes in the game. He has no way to repair his armor, and his one method of restoring health is absolute dog shit. Okay, so Hothead is absolutely fucking terrible. So killing an enemy with a headshot has a 30% chance to deal 175 force damage. A fully modded Scar is 173 damage per shot before you get into bonus perk or skill damage. So this basically reads 30% chance on kill to do 1 Scar bullet worth of damage in a small radius. Do I need to explain why that's fucking terrible? I would hope not. Preferred Customer is extremely strong. The problem is you just don't need it. You will buy your best weapon, like your final end game weapon, by about the 3rd, 4th wave at the latest in Hell on Earth. So this is nice because this will let you buy your purple tier 4 like Vulcan on like wave 2. The problem is, what the fuck are you doing on wave 2 that you actually need the Vulcan or G33 for? There's only like 2 Skrakes on that wave. In multiplayer there's more, but you also have 6 people, so you know. And the bigger problem is once you do get your Vulcan, Kunai, G33, whatever meta weapon you're going with, then what? You know? What do you do after that point? This just becomes complete dead weight. You can give the dosh to your teammates, but given the skill of the average person, 0.4% win rate, is that actually worthwhile? I would say no. So that really just kind of leaves you with Offset. And Offset's honestly a great perk. 50% Stumble. I'm just going to tell you this right now. Every single one of your weapons should have Stumble. Unless it's like the Vulcan and you're building it for co-op damage, where you don't put any Stumble bonus perks on it and you only put, like, extra damage on it, then Stumble's not that useful. But for the most part, every weapon in the game is running Stumble. Whether it's from bonus perks, the ammo, etc. Stumble is just too overpowered right now. And for the other half of the magazine, 25% damage is just really hard to say no to. Commando's already a class that severely lacks damage. This is a no-brainer. Not dead yet is fucking garbage. Leaving you at 1 HP and giving you invulnerability and blah, 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 blah. 7-minute cooldown. Killing an enemy reduces it by 5 seconds. So killing 10 enemies takes 50 seconds off this. You need to kill 12 enemies to take 1 minute off this. So you need to kill about 60, 70 enemies for this to go down to like a 3-minute cooldown. And then you need to kill like, you know, the point is you need to kill like basically a third of an entire multiplayer Hell on Earth wave by yourself for this cooldown reduction to be relevant. But like, man, this is so bad. How about just don't go down to 1 HP in the first place, you know? The only way this can be useful is if you're not confident in dealing with Hell on Earth bosses in multiplayer. In which case, it's kind of good, but really all this does is let you take one extra hit. I don't really think that's going to be too relevant. Whereas getting 2 syringes and effectively doubling the healing of every syringe is kind of nuts. Especially because you can just drop a syringe bag every round for yourself. Or if you have a medic, he can drop 2 syringes per bag. And then you're basically immortal as far as healing is concerned. So you just get a multi-tool and open up crates around the map so you never have to worry about armor. That is how Commando survives, by the way. Open up the armor crates around the map so you use that as a last-ditch armor restore. Because Commando can't restore armor at all. And then you just drop, for every round, you just drop a syringe bag or 2 and use this perk to give you a full heal for every syringe. Some people like Get Loaded better, and I will say, if you insist on using Preferred Customer, I would say use Get Loaded, because if you're going to use Preferred Customer, you're doing it so you can get the Vulcan and an Enfeeble Grenade Launcher. And if you are going to do that, you don't really want to be reloading either of those weapons because they have abysmal reloads. So, you know, this actually plays really nicely into that. However, if you're going to do the meta thing and just go for more damage, then you might as well also go for more Z time, because if you don't go Preferred Customer, you're not really going to get a good second weapon that you want to use. So you might as well double your Z time accusation. And I will say, this perk is just much stronger than the other one to begin with. Time and again, it's just significantly stronger than Get Loaded, because doubling Z time gain is honestly kind of nuts. This just flat out almost doubles the amount of Z times you get per run, which, considering Z time is like the strongest thing in the game, yeah, you want as much of that as possible. As far as his level 26 perks go, this is another one with some nuance. Limb Reaper is awful. For 5 seconds, might as well not exist. And if you're fighting a boss, or you're fighting a heavy Zed, like you're kiting Scrakes, Fleshpound, whatever, you will not ever be activating this, and even if you do activate this, it sucks, because it only lasts for 5 seconds. It also specifies ballistic damage, so you can't even use this with the current set of meta weapons. This is just all bad. Though it does have potential to be good. If you remove the damage type stipulation and made it last 15 seconds, I'd actually consider using it. However, Blaze, as long as Blaze is in the game as it is, I will never consider using that. I lied, because Blaze is just what has 100% uptime and is only 5% less damage. This is literally a no-brainer. So, why aren't we using Blaze? Well, Blaze only really works with the Commando weapon set, the Scar, the Nightsbane, etc. The problem is the Scar is not meta on the Commando, which, nice job, Tripwire, and the Nightsbane sucks after they nerfed it. Okay, it doesn't suck, but let's put it this way. It's definitely a few leagues below the Vulcan and the G33. I don't really think anyone's going to argue that. And Blaze doesn't really work with either of those weapons particularly well, because by the time you shoot the second shot, the stacks are already going away. Which really does mean if you're going to play optimal Commando, then you kind of just have to use a real Rager. It's literally the only choice that will ever do anything. And it's not like this is bad. I will say, low-key, this is kind of just better than Blaze, even if you're going to stick with the Nightsbane, because 20 seconds of 30% move speed literally does just mean 20 seconds of you cannot take damage. And with Commando's syringes being a guaranteed full heal, this can take you from 0 to 100, give you 20 seconds of immortality through kiting speed, and 30% damage. It's actually really hard to beat that. Not to mention, it synergizes very well with, the meta weapons, whereas Blaze doesn't synergize with them at all. Maybe if the balance changes of the game and the Nightsbane becomes really good at one point, then Blaze will be worth using. But as it is right now, 20 seconds of immortality through kiting, damage that actually is relevant with the good weapons. It's just too hard to ignore. Okay, now let's talk about grenades. So, grenades really only have one way to be built. Think fast is funny but sucks. Grenades exploding on impact is in no way better than them just blowing up normally, because them blowing up normally, they have like a 2-second fuse time, so they effectively already do this if you're not throwing them literally at your feet. But, you know, throwing them at your feet isn't really a bad thing, because here's the thing, right? Why the fuck are you throwing them at your feet if you don't want them to fuse under you to blow up things as they run past where you as they run past where you used to be? Christ, that's a tongue twister. You know, throwing it like this is a funny gimmick, and I like the name, but it's just not useful. Fun, but not practical. Knockabout is okay. The problem with this is, I mean, look, do you see how it's not doing anything to that bloat? And it literally doesn't do anything to the Gorefast. Look, he literally fucking just Giga Chad ignores it. Yeah, so this only stumbles the weakest enemies in the entire game. And offset and just getting stumble. Let's put it this way. You can get 60 stumble on your weapon just from your mod bonus perks. You can then get another like 80 stumble from taking the best ammo, the overpressure rounds. So you're getting like 140 base stumble, which is then going up by 50. So you're getting like 200 stumble every bullet. Whether you're going Vulcan or Nightsbane or whatever, you're basically guaranteeing stun lock, even like Skrakes and Flesh Pounds, because their stumble threshold is only like 300. So every second shot is staggering them again. So this is completely useless. Which means you really only can take a bigger bang. Which is what you want to be taking anyway, because bigger explosion radius means more kills per grenade, which means more grenade efficiency, which is better for economy. We can't really talk about that. This sucks. 225 force damage is literally fucking nothing. Okay? Think about this. One bullet from a scar is 173 damage. A headshot from a scar is double that. So a scar headshot is like 400 damage almost. This is 3 bombs of 225. This is like 3 scar headshots worth of damage, not even. You know, you and I both know it takes you like 40 scar headshots to kill a Skrake. So, you know, does this sound good at all? 3 scar headshots? You can't look at the perks and what they actually say they do. You have to, like, find the most relevant weapon comparison and then look at it through that lens. In which case, this sounds completely fucking useless, because it is. Whereas the other version is actually pretty good. Acid damage is whatever, but the point is, the initial explosion doesn't do much, but a 6-second dot cloud is actually really nice. If you throw this at an enemy spawn point, you will get so much more value out of this than you ever would from just a regular grenade. The like 6 seconds of value means instead of just killing the initial things you throw it on, you'll also get like 3 or 4 extra kills from things spawning behind them. This also lets grenades work as a trap. So you can just throw it in a hallway as you're running past it, and that's that. Enemies will take chip damage as they run through it. Not the greatest use, but hey, it's better than literally nothing, which this is. These 3 perks are actually interesting and relatively well balanced. This one is clearly the best. Destroying a head grants a stack of scavenger. At 9 stacks, gain a free grenade. Economy is everything in this game, and never having to pay for grenades, but being able to throw multiple per round for free per round. Let's put it this way. If you want other games as reference, free grenades was completely busted in Vermintide. It made the Outcast Engineer arguably the like top 3 best class in that game after they buffed it. Veteran, for a long time, was one of the best classes in Darktide, and a huge part of that was because of his free grenade generation. And what do you know? It's the same thing here. Free grenades is always good in every one of these games. Every horde shooter, free grenades is just really strong. Free grenades means you can throw down more gas traps, you can throw them down in hallways on more spawn points. It just significantly increases the amount of kills, which generates more money because the grenade was free and it's just a free dot trap. So it's generating more kills than you would otherwise get, which is generating more money. And it's not like it cost you anything to throw that grenade. Doubling the amount of Z time gained, this is nice but also a trap. It's not on kill. When destroying enemy limbs and armor. So, like, that's kind of not good because grenades tend to just instantly kill small enemies, which I'm pretty sure it's coded so that that doesn't actually count as, like, breaking them. They have to, like, survive to have stuff broken. Though, I wouldn't quote me on that one, but it just doesn't feel like it's that impactful. And it really doesn't synergize well with the acid grenade at all, and the acid grenade is just the superior grenade, so it's just kind of like a catch-22. This one is either really good or really crap. It depends on how you use it. Though I will say I noticed I don't get 30 dosh when the acid cloud kills things, only the initial explosion. So you're kind of in a weird situation. Do you use this and try to generate more money? You have to generate the problem with this, right? A grenade costs 200 dosh. You need to generate at least 200 dosh with this. So that means you need to generate like 7 kills per grenade for this to actually just pay you back. That's way harder than it sounds. You would think that, you know, that would be easy, but most spawn points, they're only coded to spawn like 4 or 5 enemies at a time. They'll spawn one group of 4, and then like 2 seconds later, they'll spawn another group of 4. But they're not stacked up. So you usually end up getting like 120-ish dosh per grenade throw on this, which actually puts you in the negative. So it's just a slight refund. Whereas, again, Scavenger is just a full refund. And Scavenger lets you run the better grenade type that will get you more kills per throw. So it's one of those things where intuitively you think this and this is going to be the best. But because of weird quirks of how the system works, it's just not. Okay, now let's talk about the gadget. Acceptable damage is kind of a trap. This is a noob trap skill. It sounds really fucking good until you think about it. So, everything that isn't a heavy Zed is one-shot by the Hellion. Which means the only things that are gaining this increased damage are heavy Zeds. Well, do you know what is also the enemy most likely to just walk out of the acid pile? That's right, the heavy Zeds. So, this is a weird trap skill, because if you are fighting, say, a Scrake, it will just keep shooting the Scrake until the impact damage kills it. Or the Scrake will just walk out of the acid. Everything else gets one-shot by the AoE from this. So this skill, 90% of the time, does literally nothing. It's just slightly more damage versus bosses. But this skill is absolutely terrible when you seriously, like, break down how the drone actually works. This skill, on the other hand, is actually really good and synergizes really well with skills further down the tree. Making enemies panic for longer in the acid, as you can see, this makes them stand in the acid. So the problem I just mentioned about Scrakes and Flesh Pounds walking away just kind of stops existing. This also synergizes really well with the superior gas grenade, because if you throw a gas grenade in a spawn point and you activate your your Hellion, the Hellion acid will sit in that, like, choke point with the gas grenade on it, and everything standing in it will panic for a long time, where they just sit there and soak up the acid damage and the grenade damage. So even without that synergy, or using the G33, with zero synergy, this is still, like, objectively superior to this. Though I really wouldn't blame you for taking this, because unless you're, like, a nerd like me and you sit down and really, like, record footage and think about this stuff, you would not suspect that this skill is as bad as it actually is. But it makes a lot of sense when you lay it out like that, you know? Anyway, this is just better as is, but it also synergizes with the G33 and it synergizes with the gas grenade. So, you know, this is acceptable to run, though the real problem with this is the drone just isn't active long enough. I mean, literally, look at this clip. The drone was active for, what, like 5 seconds? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi. Yeah, it takes about 6 seconds for the drone to blow its load. Is 6 seconds of 30% reduced damage every, 30 seconds that good? I wouldn't say so. That's like 10% uptime, or 20% uptime. And that's assuming you even maintain that much uptime on the drone per wave. You probably won't. Hell, I know I don't. So you're really only left with one option here. So the acid clouds lasting for a longer time synergizes with keeping them in it. Oh, geez, sorry, I'm literally dying. Longer lasting acid clouds means more time for enemies to stand in them and panic, and more time for them to soak up the damage, more time for them to soak up damage from acid grenades and G33 rounds. It also synergizes better with the level 30 perk that makes the acid deal more damage the longer it's active. This actually lets the acid do substantial damage. And you see, the other perk isn't bad, it's just not as good. Giving a 40% radius increase on each acid glob is okay. The problem is this makes each acid glob significantly less valuable. You're already covering everything in the horde or in a choke point with the default acid size, so making it bigger will usually not result in you hitting any extra enemies. If it does, it's usually 1 or 2 extra guys, but you'd much rather the big crowd of guys that you're already fully saturating, just take, because 5 seconds is like doubling their duration, which also doubles your bonus from smog warning. So they end up taking like triple damage because they're taking double damage from the pools lasting as long, and each tick is dealing double damage from that stacking bonus. This also doubles the time that they're panicked, which doubles the time acid grenades can affect them, and grenade launcher rounds can affect them. So, This row is kind of interesting, and I wish some of these perks were better. So the obvious pick here is Hellions projectile initial impact damage is increased by 35%. This is just kind of nice, and it lets you save like a bullet or two when killing a flesh pounder or scrake. But it's really more that these other 2 perks are just kind of bad. So the initial impact applying Enfeeble is nice, but have you heard of the Enfeeble G33? The ever humble Enfeeble grenade launcher, You shoot 1 round of that down on the acid pools, which they're stuck in panicking, and they just sit there and build up like 400 stacks or whatever of Enfeeble. So, that just kind of invalidates this perk, not gonna lie. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Certainly wouldn't be like a flaw to take it, but it also certainly would not be better than increasing the damage. This one I can see people taking as the most viable secondary pick. Just standing in the acid regenerates your health. There's just one small problem, though. The things in the acid will kill you. So, if you're using the drone properly, it will be shooting enemies, which means it's shooting either the large group that's chasing you down, or it's shooting enemies as they're spawning in their choke point like spawn areas. You don't want to be standing in either of those locations ever. If the drone could shoot like an acid cloud at your feet, or something like that, or if this perk just worked with any acid cloud, like from any grenade launcher or from your own grenade, then this perk would actually be really good. But the fact that you have to go stand where the enemies that are getting shot by the drone are standing, which is just not how this game works, you're endlessly kiting, kind of makes this perk really terrible. So you're really only left with one option. Granted, it is a good one. This is one of the worst balanced perk selections in the entire game. I will actually consider you stupid for taking Business Expanse. I'm sorry that's a little rude, but, this is the most non-choice in the entire game. I'm sorry, it just is. Destroying enemy weak spots grants 6 Gadget activation energy. Okay, maybe you're not stupid. Maybe you just don't know how much 6 is and you're unwilling to try it one time to experiment, though I would then say you're still kind of ignorant. Point is, this is like 7% of the Gadget's activation on every single kill. This one perk single-handedly allows you to use the Gadget like 4 times per wave in solo, and like 8 or 10 times per wave in multiplayer with the 400 wave spawns. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Because you only need, I think it's like 100 or so energy to activate his gadget. So you kill like 5 guys as they spawn, and that's like 30% of your gadget recharged in like a second. Versus each activation gets 6 rounds. Well, it already has 8 rounds. This isn't even doubling how much you can shoot. Would you rather use the drone 5 times as much and gain 5 times as much benefit from all these other perks and synergies? Or would you rather use the drone 5 times less, but each time is 70% longer? It's the most no-brainer. You just count the number of shots per wave. So, like, if you activate the drone twice with this, you get, like, 14 shots. If you activate the drone normally with, like, activating it 5 times per round or whatever, you get, like, 30 shots. This is just objectively better. There is never a circumstance where this is worth taking. They would genuinely need to make this, by the way. They would need to make it increase the number of rounds fired by like 12 or like 17 or something crazy like that for it to even remotely come close to the other option. This one is actually interesting. There's definitely a correct choice here, and it's this one. But we'll talk about the others. So smog warning increases the damage by 35% for each second they're active. Now, this plays in with all this other shit. Enemies that are panicked aren't leaving the acid, which means the acid is just sitting there building up multiple pools. The acid doubling its duration means you get twice the time for this to build twice the stacks. So instead of stopping at like 100%, it goes up to 200% or whatever. And because they're standing there panicked in it, they're actually taking all that damage. These 3 perks just kind of synergize together in a really nice fashion that allows one activation of this to single-handedly kill like 3 Skrakes. And then this allows you to constantly activate it every like 10-20 seconds. Okay, let's talk about the other ones. Number of secondary projectiles increased to 9 is kind of nice. You can see it covers a way larger area like this. Just one small problem. The default projectiles, as I said before, it's the same problem with the radius increase versus the additional time. If the entire horde, spawn point, and or choke point, or all of the above at the same time, are being covered by the acid, which they are already, and the enemies can't leave the pools because they're stuck panicking in them, why do you care about, this? And considering that you cannot get smog warning for the increased ticks of damage, and this, dropping more puddles is not as effective. Think about it. 3 puddles that deal 200% more damage. So you have puddle number 1 that deals 200% more damage, which means it's dealing the damage of like 4 puddles. Then you have the second puddle that's now dealing the damage of 4 puddles as well. The third one dealing damage of 4 puddles. That's 12 puddles worth of damage, all overlapped, that they're stuck panicking in. Okay, well, 12 puddles worth of damage is better than 9 puddles worth of damage. So even if you get these 9 puddles to overlap, which you probably won't, without taking the radius increase, which then means the puddles are around for less time. So this means each puddle deals substantially less damage and is around for substantially less time. This synergy is just objectively not as good. You see what I'm saying? And then finally, standing in Hellion's acid makes it so your health can't be reduced below 30 for 3 seconds. This is, like, okay, I guess. If you were going to take Caustic Cure, this perk exists so that you can't die while trying to benefit from this. But can I just explain to you how god-awful that is? Like, I'm sure you're smart enough to figure this out, but in case not, and I mean that genuinely because maybe it's just not obvious to you, no insult intended, think about this. You're going into the acid to heal, but remember that problem I said earlier about you're walking into the enemies to stand on the acid because it's shooting at the enemies? Why, if your perk that gives you health back needs a backup secondary perk that stops you from dying when you try to use it, maybe this just fucking sucks and you shouldn't do this in the first place. especially considering that you're giving up 35 damage on every shot and 35 stacking damage on every tick on every puddle. So you're giving up like 80% of the drone's total damage potential to do some kind of borderline bullshit garbage healing that is so bad it needs a built-in fucking safety measure to make sure you don't die for doing it. Come on, you're not an idiot. You're not going to take this. Okay, let's talk about weapons just a little bit more. The Wraith is decent. As you can see, it's 118 damage. And you can get it to 2950, which will eat pretty much all of your operational starting budget. The Storm Guard is fucking terrible. The Storm Guard is 70 damage base, just like the Wraith. So, like, you can just see, we can just throw the mods on it. And, like, look, it does the same fucking damage as the Wraith. Don't ever take this. This is arguably, like, one of the worst weapons in the game. Go straight from Wraith to Scar to Knightsbane if you want to stick to commando weapons. If you want to do more meta stuff, go either Wraith directly into Vulcan if you use preferred customer, or Wraith into Scar into Vulcan, or like Wraith into G33 into Vulcan, or something like that if you aren't using preferred customer. Side note, it's also important to mod your pistol just in case you join on Wave 2, because then you will spawn in with your modded pistol and your modded primary for free. And if you don't mod your pistol, you're just wasting like 2,000 dosh, because you can trade this pistol in to get that money that the mods are providing it for free. Which again, lets you spawn in Wave 2 and buy a purple weapon without preferred customer, which further makes preferred customer extremely useless in that scenario. Some other weapons that are kind of okay with commando. The marksman is just kind of okay, but not really though. The kunai is just broken if you're going to macro the bashing thing. And you should pretty much always buy the medic pistol if you can afford it. Something you can also do with commando, especially if you want to go the preferred customer route, is start with the Wraith, buy the Vulcan, then buy the biomorphic projector, because, you know, this is just a really strong pocket weapon to pull out and just heal everyone around you with. Obviously, the Enfeeble G33 is just really fucking good, because you just shoot it down once and enemies lose half their movement speed and damage. Also, the explosive ammo Bonebreaker is pretty strong for just regular trash clear, though the commando doesn't really need it. I really think that's just about everything with the commando. Use his skill on cooldown, the Hellion. Make sure you use the Hellion basically every single time you get the chance to maximize its effectiveness. Make sure you're always throwing at least one grenade so you're not sitting at 4 of them so you can gain from these stacks. And, yeah. I think that covers just about everything.